who owns that problem? Now, is it the person who is accountable? Is it the person that they give responsibility to? I'm being quite open here because I'm prepared to change my view about this because I'm not actually sure that I've got it right. And I've been coaching for 10 years. The question then is accountability responsibility? Well, my view is sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. It depends who is responsible for bringing the action together. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who reports to the accountable person. What's your view, Bilal?
Well, I do believe that person who owns the metric is the person who has two responsibilities. Number one, they are the ones who have the ability to affect that value in some way. And second, they need to be the one who have the ability to ask for help if that gets out of hand. So there might be the member of the leadership team that needs to escalate and say, ring the bell, as you say, and to be able to say, hey, we need help to do this.
Welcome back to CardCast, the podcast where Milan and I choose a card at random. We draw a card at random from a pack of cards just like these, and then we have a chat about it. We have a brief conversation, which is a lot of fun and normally pretty interesting. Let's shuffle the deck.
Metric ownership. Oh, interesting. We've done an episode on the other metrics card. There's obviously a few of them because how can you improve something you cannot measure it? So metrics happen when we are talking about systems or execution, all of those things. But this one is talking about one specific aspect of it. What does it mean to own a metric? And in our pre-conversation, you said that maybe we'll disagree on that one. So I'll let you to state your opinion first.
Yeah, okay. So metrics are things that leadership teams and leaders in particular love to hate. Because it's historically, it's a bit like meetings. Companies don't get this right. They measure something that isn't worthwhile measuring, and they don't measure the things that is worthwhile measuring. So first of all, let's make an assumption that we're measuring the right things here, because there's no point in measuring the wrong things. But companies still often do. Now, measuring the right things is one thing, but you still need ownership around those metrics. And by ownership, I mean who is actually going to take accountability for making the number for that metric the right one. Now, is the revenue at the right level? Are the number of leads at the right level? As in, are we getting enough leads? Is the revenue at the point we want it to be? Often that's not the case. Often we're behind. Often we're behind in revenue, or we haven't got enough leads or enough opportunities. So the question then is, who owns that problem? Now, is it the person who is accountable? Is it the person that they give responsibility to? And I'm being quite open here because I'm prepared to change my view about this because I'm not actually sure that I've got it right. And I've been coaching for 10 years. So the model I have is that whoever is accountable, now they are the person who has to ring the bell and make sure that if the number is not heading in the right direction, up or down. So if there aren't enough leads, if there aren't enough opportunities. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do the thing that needs to be done to get it right, but they need to be able to exert some influence on that person to make sure it is heading in the right direction. So, if you're 2% down on leads, well, you're probably just going to make sure that heads the right direction. If you're 15% down, then you've probably got an obligation to ring the bell and tell the leadership team, we've got a problem. And because it takes 3 months to get it from a lead to a closed deal, we've got a problem for the next quarter that we can't do anything about now because that time has passed. But here is what we're doing to get it back on track. Now, the question then is accountability responsibility? Well, my view is sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. It depends who is responsible for bringing the action together. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who reports to the accountable person. What's your view, Bilal?
Well, I'm disappointed because I was hoping in this disagreement. And no, I am not that far from your thinking. I do believe that person who owns the metric is the person who has two responsibilities. number one, they are the ones who have the ability to affect that value in some way. And that could be that, they have the people who are doing that job, affect it. Like, for example, your typical metric in consulting being billable hours, right? So then the head of the consulting team is probably the one who's going to own it. And then every single of the people on the team are going to own the child metrics, which is their own billable hours, right? And then we're looking at the top. So they should have the ability to affect the outcome through efficiency, through planning, whatever that is. And second, they need to be the one who have the ability to ask for help if that gets out of hand. So there might be the member of the leadership team that needs to escalate and say, ring the bell, as you say, and to be able to say, hey, we need help to do this, or, this is really slipping. It can have a massive downstream implications on the business or on the operations as a whole. So I don't think that we are that far. I think that you are maybe a little bit less on the ability to affect the number, and you're more on the authority to say something is wrong and then drive a change that happens. While I'm a little more on, you really shouldn't be measured on something that you cannot affect. And the owner is the person for whom the metric says, how is my job going? Right? If you bring it down to the concept of one number, that whatever role you're in, right? And on KFFM, you would see it. There is generally a one number that basically tells you, hey, this number is good. We're in decent place. Yes, there might be a whole bunch of leading indicators that will tell you what it is, but that's the analytical part of it. Ultimately, do we have enough leads? Do we have enough billable hours? And by enough, I mean, are we within the range of where we expect to be? Because sometimes having too many is, as bad as having too few, because again, the downstream implications of whatever it is that is happening, because somebody's performance metric is probably somebody else's leading indicator.
Absolutely.
And we are looking at the whole system, right?
Yeah. I think we're using a different word to mean the same thing. I mean, you're using the term effect, I'm using the term influence. With the way I use the term influence, that influence can be very, very strong, as in that person has complete influence on where that number ends up. Or it could be that they need to influence someone else in a different function to achieve an aspect of that number. So it could be, yes, this is in my control and I'm responsible, but it could also be, yes, I'm partially responsible, but I'm also relying on this person, and this person to do their jobs. And I've got to influence them to make sure that they do. Because they might not be under your line management authority. And that's often a discussion point. I'll say, well, you need to make sure this happens. Oh, but they don't report to me. I don't care. You're a leader. You're a manager. You've got to influence them to get to the right outcome. And that's often a real discussion point. Oh, and I've got to be able to manage the people that I'm accountable for the numbers for. Nah, you just need to be a leader.
Yeah, or you need to manage the process. You need to own the standard operating procedure that leads to that, right? Can we agree on one point? That is, no matter how you define that ownership, what the definition is and who the owner is needs to be clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Within an organization.
Yeah. So sometimes a leadership team will come to me. I mean, I'll use the example of revenue. The head of operations or the COO will say, well, look, I'm accountable for revenue, but I actually don't count it. The CFO counts it, and he gives me the number at the end of every week or whatever. So in my mind, as in the leader will say this to me, in my mind, the CFO is accountable for that number. And I'll say, no, they're just accountable. They're just responsible for giving you the number. And the conversation often goes, well, okay, it seems silly for the CFO to give me the number to put it into metronome, so I'm just going to ask him to put it in. And I will allow that, but every single time we meet, I'm hiding the revenue number and I'm calling on the COO to tell me whether we are on track or off track without seeing the number. Because if they're not putting it in, they still need to know it.
Yeah. And look, you could use the same argument is to say that not that the CFO gives it to me, but some intern in the analytical team is the one who makes sure that that number on the dashboard is right. So why wouldn't they put it in metronome? Or for crying out loud, why isn't it automatically put into metronome? Because of the behavior. Because the whole point is that if you own the metric, you need to know. And you cannot be surprised by the value in the meeting, right? Because that thing is determining whether your job is going well or not. And it doesn't matter where the number comes from. The important thing is what it means, and what it means to you, what it means to the team, and if it's out of bounds of where we want it to be, what are you going to do about it? That's the ownership, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we are probably 99.9% aligned on this one, Muller.